Right, I'm going to have a quick look at some very early telescopic sights. Now, telescopic sights really didn't come into their own until the late 70s, and by the 80s, pretty much everyone was putting telescopic sights onto their rifles of one sort or another. Now, the very earliest telescopic sights for air rifles were generally made of plastic and also had horrible plastic lenses, and the optical qualities were fairly grim. But by the late 70s, the quality had improved dramatically, and you started to see, in fact, most of these scopes were actually made in Japan. So what I've got here, I've got a very early Webley, and this is a 4x20, and as you can see, made in Japan for Webley and Scott Limited. And this is a 4x20, like I say. This was probably considered at the time the slightly posher scope. A 4x20 was considered quite a posh scope, and during the very early to mid 70s. Most of them came with these sort of integral mounts that, to be honest, weren't particularly good, and the adjustments were really straightforward. You could either do it with a coin or your nail, and it was just up, down, and that was about it, really. Having said all of that, the actual optics in some of these Japanese scopes was actually very, very good. The optical quality of these things with Japanese lenses is very good, very good. And when you think today that to get Japanese lenses in a scope these days, you're looking at very expensive scopes. But back then, Japanese lenses were pretty much de rigueur in all telescopic sights. So that's an early Webley 4x20 with a very early style mounting system. And then they improved slightly. So again, another Webley 4x20. Again, made in Japan for Webley and Scott. Only this one now, they started to improve the mounting system and went to mounts that look a bit more familiar to the sort of mounts that we're used to today. And the other thing is, most of these scopes, no matter who made them, most of them had these little yellow inspection stickers put on them. And as you can see, Institute Japan Telescopic Sight Inspection 108 passed. Now, you don't often find telescopic sights with these little stickers still on them, because most people peeled them off as soon as they bought them. But this one's still got the original inspection sticker on it. And again, straightforward crosshairs, nothing to them really. Very, very basic. The cheaper end, and the first ones to sort of come out, was this one. And this is just a little 4x15. But this one's got, again, a later style mounting system on it. It's like a one-sided mounting system on this particular version. And again, Japanese lenses, but pretty basic. Parallax wasn't a problem with these scopes because the objectives were so tiny and the magnification was so low. Parallax played very little part in them at all, really. And to be honest, if you had something like that on your rifle back in the early 80s, you'd be pretty chuffed with yourself, because that would be a pretty decent scope to have on your rifle, and you'd be quite happy to have that on a rifle. You think that most people, late 70s, were still shooting with open sights. If you had something like that on, or even this, on your rifle, you'd be pretty made up and pretty chuffed. By the sort of by the early mid-80s, obviously, companies like Tasco, Optima, to name two of the big players at the time, had started bringing in a whole range of much superior scopes. and probably the biggest one that you saw at the time was a 4x40, but the 4x32 was pretty much the next level up from one of these, if you like. 4x32s were quite posh scopes back then. You were doing really well. And Optima in the mid-80s brought in what they call the Moonlighter and the Super Moonlighter. Now the Moonlighter had a 50mm objective, and it also had a zoom. I think it was something like 3:9 or something like that. And the Super Moonlighter had, no, the Moonlighter was a 45mm objective and the Super Moonlighter was a 50. So they were, by the mid-80s, the sort of scopes that you'd be fairly familiar with today had started to creep onto the scene. But they were very expensive. But these were your mainstay. Late 70s, early 80s. If you had one of these, you'd think you were doing well. If you had one of those stuck on your BSA Air Sport or Mercury or whatever, you'd be well happy. Like I say, Japanese glass, so the optics were very good. The optics weren't bad at all. This is still quite a usable scope, this 4x20. This one, especially these mounts. These mounts aren't too bad. So that's still quite usable. The little 4x15, not so good, I must admit, because the light gathering is quite poor, even though the lenses are reasonable. Crosshairs were very basic. Like I say, it literally was just a crosshair. That was it. The main problem with them was not so much the optics, but the mechanics of them. It was easy to overdo the adjustments. And also if you put them on too high a recoiling rifle, especially the small ones, it wasn't that uncommon to actually break a crosshair, because all of them weren't glass etched crosshairs, they were proper wire crosshairs. So there you go, 3 old scopes. And this one's I'm quite pleased with this one because it's still got the little sticker on it. That's quite a rare thing to see, the ones with the sticker still on them, because nearly everybody took those stickers off. They came pretty much on everything. Everything that had Japanese glass had one of these little yellow labels stuck on them, generally speaking.